Hello, good evening, and warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. And welcome, not for the first time, as regular viewers will notice, my friend George's study. I am almost onto solar. I think it's coming in 2 weeks' time. It's taken a while to get it all sorted out, and then the problems of ESCOM and their delightful energy strategy will hopefully be out the window. We'll always be in the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar, but for now I'm sitting in a council's office just down the road from the cellar, but still armed with plenty of wine to discuss with three really cool winemakers who have a collective love of Cinsault, but also a combined ability to just make some really, really cool wine. And I'm very excited to have all three of them on the show today, and I'll be welcoming them in just a moment. On the back of what has been, as you'll see from some pictures in a moment, a fairly manic weekend. It has been Greek Easter. You might have seen some stuff on social media. Greek Easter is the most important date in the Greek calendar. My wife is Greek, and so celebrations with the family took place all through the weekend and culminated yesterday with the most almighty collection of lamb you will ever see. And if you think I'm being a little overzealous in my description, well, I've got some proof coming up in just a moment. That will form part of the latest news from the wine world on Dan Really Likes Wine. So let's go and have a quick look. Here's what's been happening over the last few days. So there we go. There is a glimpse, and you can see that play out. That is that is the lamb for yesterday's lunch. If you are a vegan, look at what's too late now, isn't it? That was out at the Greek church in Benoni. Yeah, that's 20, 30 lambs all done together. Now, we had one of those at our table, and my job was to carve it all, which is a tough job. Yes, it does fall apart at the seams a bit, but there's a lot of meat on there to remove, and that made for a really good day. It also made for a really interesting day because we had some wine with it, unsurprisingly, but what was surprising was this. I'd never had this before. In fact, I doubt anybody on the show, anybody watching, has heard of it, let alone tried it. This could be the only wine made in Pretoria. The grapes come from Paul Duneko, which is the family surname. It's not made commercially. Ilya and his cousin, I think a biochemist, make this wine together up in Pretoria. That was the Shiraz. It's a dark, fruity, slightly rustic wine that was very pleasant to drink and was washed down happily with handfuls of lamb. I'm actually going to try and get Ilya on the show with his cousin. It's quite an interesting story and went well with some of the other wine we had, including some of the Jericares wine. And we also, I say this with a shudder, we had some wine, some of the Follow the Line from Duncan Savage, which somebody, I won't mention who, added to his Coca-Cola. Certainly not me. If Duncan ever finds that out, I'm not sure he'll talk to me again. Speaking of Duncan, indirectly, he is looked after up in Johannesburg by the guys at Great Domains and Derek from Great Domains. You might remember last Thursday's show. I told you we were off to do a tasting with him. Well, this was some of the wine. It was a really interesting evening where he took wine of the same varietal, but from different parts of the world, South Africa and France. And here you had the Cartology, which is the almost entirely Chenin Blanc from Chris and Suzanne Alheit. It is the wine that really put them on the map. It's not quite 100%. There's a just under 10% Semillon in there, but it is a world-class wine that's got a huge army of followers, and it showed really well against the Ayot Blanc from the Loire Valley, and the difference there on the left, the South African wine that's got loads more sunshine, and that's not just me using some marketing. You can taste it in the riper fruit, the juicier wine that comes through, set against a leaner, tauter, tighter French wine. The comparison is really interesting. You'll often find South Africans will find French wine is just that bit reserved and that little bit tight and lean, and the French will often think that a comparative wine is one that's just a bit too showy and fruity and noisy, and it mostly just speaks to the climate, a bit of terroir, but climate is a big part of it. So that was the first comparison. We also did a comparison with some Syrah. So there you have Jean Smit on the right, and then Shove, not the big gun, but the JL Shove Selection, which is one made to try and create wine that's just a bit accessible, not quite so expensive. And again, it was quite similar. Actually, the 2019 just felt a bit younger, despite the fact that the Damascene on the right was a 2021, which felt a little older, certainly a bit fruitier, a bit more pepper to it. And again, just a really interesting comparison between two Syrahs, and a reminder of just what wonderful wine Jean is making at Damascene. And then a couple of big guns from Pauillac. This is just outside of Bordeaux, sits in the Grand Bordeaux region, and some really accessible Bordeaux price-wise, against Dani Statler's big Pentagon, an almighty beast of a wine from the King of Bry in Stellenbosch. And again, this was a third South African wine in a row that went up against a very good French wine, not a Grand Cru or a first growth, but still a very good French wine, and delivered a really solid and, in most cases, a very impressive performance for South Africa. And then we wrapped up just with two quite interesting wines for a bit of fun, both blind, neither of which I'm happy to say Derek was able to get exactly. First on the right, and I was drinking this on the show last week, from Loeverland, the Tolbos Tanat, which featured in the Minority Report from Priska, the new home of South African wine. Bertie Coetzee thinks it's got a good chance, and that was a really interesting wine to drink. Tanat, not something we see a lot of. And then on the left, I love this. This is from the Russian River. I think we just call it the River now, the River Valley. They've dropped the Russian. 2012 from Deloach, and this had aged gloriously. It had that little hint of sweetness that often suggests New World over Burgundy, and the age on it was just perfect. So great night out, and a big thank you to Derek Kilpin and his team from Great Domains for a really, really special evening. Right, well, let's move on to our guests today. All of them make some pretty special wine, and two of them are returning. One, I've lost count of how many times we've had her on the show. We can't get rid of her, and very happily so. We also, though, have a debutante. So let's welcome our newest name first, who I very sadly missed while I was down on the Hemel-en-Aarde Valley last month on the Cape Epic. Alexander Macfarlane joins us on the show with our Macfarlane wines for the first time. Also returning to the show is Lorraine from Stellenzicht, who we haven't had on for a couple of years now, but lovely to have Lorraine back. And then the scourge of Dan really likes wine. Only person I know who's got 6 stars from John Platter. Erika Obermeyer is back with us again. Lovely to have you two. Guys, welcome all of you, and lovely to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Alex, for being on for the first time. And I feel rather guilty that it is the first time. So we'll have to have plenty of repeat appearances going forward to make up for that. Before we start having a look at the wine, and thank you for a wonderful selection you have sent up, tell me a little bit about, first of all, the Alex Macfarlane wine story. How do you find yourself doing what you do today?
Thanks for having me on for the first time. It's a pleasure. This was actually a project. It's a business that my husband and I both own, and we started doing this part-time for 2019, which was the first vintage. And we both worked full-time and were squirreling money away and basically funding the whole project to just invest our money in a different way in ourselves, and to also make something that was ours, that we had autonomy over. To showcase heritage varieties in South Africa, and Cinso kind of falls under that umbrella. And we've been slowly growing. COVID was a bit of a knock, but it was a knock for everyone. And I think I preferred it to have been a knock early on because we weren't drawing a salary out of it. And we've now kind of grown our range to 3 wines that are more entry level for the restaurants and the wine bars. And then we've got a range of single varietals for Chenin and Cinso, and we will be bringing out a Pinotage quite soon as well. So and here we are, 2023, which was our biggest vintage yet, and we hopefully will grow a little bit more for next year and continue to grow.
So full of all sorts of new wine and some really cool and exciting stuff. What about the method behind it all? Where do the grapes come from? How do you put it together? How does the operational side of things work?
Up until now, we've kind of been sourcing grapes from all over the Western Cape. So I buy from vineyards in Franschhoek, Bredekloof, Durbanville, Stellenbosch. I even bought some really nice pinotage from down in Stanford. We buy some Semillon from Bot River, from closer by as well, and we drive everything in ourselves, or we use a courier. And up until February, because we were doing this part-time, it was lots of after-hours work and weekends, and I had an intern for Harvest last year, which was, I don't think I would have been able to do it otherwise. And from February this year, I resigned from the work that I was doing, and I've gone back to full-time winemaking, focusing on the brand. So I'm a bit of a one-man band at the moment, doing everything from the sales and all the other background admin stuff to the winemaking as well on my own, which is an absolute dream. But I do think that you do work a lot harder when you're working for yourself. So yeah.
But your dream is clearly the right word, because you talk about the saving up with your husband and then leaving the former job and really focusing on this. Yes, it's definitely lots of work, I have no doubt, but it is obviously fueled by a huge amount of passion.
Yeah, and I think the best part is that it's become a big part of our marriage as well, because we talk about our business and growing the business and what we need to do, and we get so excited about South African varieties that have put South Africa on the map, and what are we going to do next, and which wine are we going to bring out next, and what's so exciting about this particular new vineyard that we may have been getting fruit from. And I think to be able to share that with your partner is probably one of the most amazing things. I don't think we would have predicted that it would have been this cool, but don't get me wrong, we have big fights, but it's all for a good cause, because we're both really passionate about what South Africa has to offer and the value of our wines, and how important it is for us to share the stories of the important vineyards and the varieties that we have in South Africa that are not the Chardonnays and the Sauvignon Blancs and Cabs. Don't get me wrong, I love them all, but we've got such special, amazing, unique varieties that we have a chance to showcase and be really proud of.
And the key one of those is Cinsault. We'll come back to that in a moment. I think you're going to hear quite a bit about Cinsault on this evening's show, because it is loved by all three of our winemakers, including Lorraine. Let's jump over to Stellenzicht. Welcome back to the show. I think it's been a couple of years since we had you on, so lovely to have you returning. Give us an update on Stellenzicht over the last year or two. What's been seriously cool on Planet Stellenzicht of late?
Thank you for having me back. It's lovely. Yeah, I think we chatted and our wines basically had just reached the market. So we launched in 2021, which is really exciting for us. Probably in hindsight, launching just after COVID, not the best of business decisions, but you roll the punches. But a great addition to the Stellenzicht family or estate has been our eco wine pod that we launched in December of 2021. So it just really kind of fits into our whole ethos, our whole brand philosophy, what we stand for, what we believe in. So we've put a really hard emphasis as a brand on not just sustainability, but regenerative farming as well. Our logo is a dragonfly, which is a great bioindicator of Mother Nature in balance. And so the EcoPod was really for us and just an extension of what we believe in. So it's got no foundations. It's completely off the grid. And super cool little spot just in between the Fynbos. And we've got a wood-fired pizza oven, and you can just kind of kick back, have a pizza and relax and enjoy our wines. So that's been a great addition. And then also we've introduced some new vintages on our Chardonnays, our Cinsault and Rosé. So yeah, it's been busy, but it's all been a great adventure so far. And looking ahead to all the new adventures.
We tend to see a lot of the aesthetic changes come through, the establishment of labels, throwing in cool stuff like pizza ovens. But a big part of it is a lot more blue collar, a lot more day to day, as you kind of find your feet with the wine and you get to know a little better, get to know the vineyards a bit better. Have you felt that process playing out? And are you feeling a lot more comfortable with the terroir that you're now working on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, definitely. So I joined the team in 2017, and 2018 was my first vintage there and our first vintage under the new ownership. And so, I mean, 6 years later, I can definitely say between myself and Nico, our viticulturist, we've walked these vineyards through and through. We know the little pockets that we love. We know which ones ripen earlier, and also we put a lot of emphasis when we took over the property on rejuvenation of the vineyards. Unfortunately, we had quite a few vineyards that was sick with leaf roll, and we had to take them out. And so it's really exciting seeing those new vineyards come into production and getting to know them. And it's a whole new kind of baby that you need to get up on its feet and learn its little likes and dislikes and its good parts and bad parts, I guess. So far it's only been showing good parts, which I'm really happy about. But yeah, so it's really, really exciting. And one of the blocks that have come in production finally is our Chardonnay and Cinsault, which to me is I'm really excited to see how they develop. So we're in year one, which is not always the best indication, but yeah, hopefully next year I can give some good feedback on those baby vineyards and how they're doing.
I can see you, like Alex, are itching to talk about Cinsault. We are going to do that in just a moment. But I do want to ask you about one of the other elements. You touched on that new ownership. It's part of a broader collective. When we had you on the show last time, I think we did chat a bit about the relationship with Ernie else in general, with Louis Stradom in particular, who's done so much for so many people in terms of helping to guide them along their wine journeys. How's that relationship progressed, both with Louis and his team, but also between the two estates over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so we share an owner, and Louis Stradom is our CEO. So it's great to have a winemaker that is kind of in charge in that sense from a business perspective. He understands production. He understands that it takes a while to build to build up a name again, and really to make a brand or get it going. It doesn't happen overnight. You need to knock on a lot of doors and what's his favorite saying? Kiss the babies and smile and nod and do all the things for it to finally all happen. But yeah, so it's been great having him as our CEO. But we run independently, so it's two different brands. I think a lot of people wonder if we what do we do in the background? We don't do anything in the background. It's two different brands. We've got two winemakers, two viticulturists, two wine estates. But yeah, it's really nice to know there's somebody at the helm that understands wine and the whole production process.
It makes for a formidable team and as such formidable wine. We get to those in a second. Let's say a quick hello, first of all, to Erika, though, and welcome her back to the show. Erika, lovely to have you. We chatted very briefly before we jumped online. You were looking fairly calm and relaxed. Madness of harvest, all done, everything in? And if so, how happy are we with 2023?
Hi, Dan. Great to be back on the show. I'm happy that you gave me a little bit of time to finish up with harvest. As you can see in the back there, everything is quite neat and tidy and calm and quiet. So yeah, I'm very happy with 2023. I love the uneven vintages, although 2022 is probably going to go down as one of my favorite vintages, my first one in this cellar. But also the even years was probably put in bed by I never kind of vouch for even vintage, but 22 certainly changed my mind. This vintage, we haven't sold the wine, so we all have to say it's been the best one ever. It certainly kept me on my toes. We had a lot of heat, we had a lot of rain. I was lucky to bring in all my fruit. Unfortunately, I had the middle rain. We had 50 mils of rain literally 2 days before the cab had to come in, but we secured, I couldn't pick everything, so there's very low volumes on the Cabernet Sauvignon for 2023, but they're all in barrel and they're looking really good at this stage. So I'm happy. Yeah, tired bodies, our minds had to be busy all the time. I think this was the vintage where a winemaker couldn't even look at his phone. You could have missed a great opportunity of picking. Yeah. So yeah, all in all, I'm very happy.
Yeah, that does seem to be the general consensus, that there are some harvests you can blithely say make themselves. They obviously don't, but they do make it a lot easier for you as winemakers. This was not one of them. I know there were times where you were sort of switching on generators at 2 a.m. and running around like a nutcase in the middle of the night. It was one of those vintages that you had to be absolutely sure that this is what you wanted to do with your life.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I've had many moments this vintage, like, really, Erika, how long do you still want to chase a grape's skin on the floor at 3 o'clock in the morning? But, there's nothing better than harvest, the energy, the adrenaline, that rush to bring the fruit in. And you can be so tired, and the next morning you just take like extra strong coffee and you get to the vineyards, and the minute where you see the sunrise and you taste that berries, there's just this passion that's ignited in you as a winemaker. And I can't wait to do it all over again. I always, like, towards the end of harvest, you're tired and there's just another pump over to do over weekends, and it feels like it's never going to stop. But that minute that you press, I want to break into tears, because it's just the most fun time of the year. And I think we get to do it only once a year. So we really need to savor that phenomenal adrenaline and energy around it.
Lorraine's already quoted Louis Stradom. I shall paraphrase him, where he frequently says, you've only got 40 harvests to get Oh, there we go. My apologies for that. The joys of load shedding and power. But we are back, and Wi-Fi has been sorted out. So I was just paraphrasing Louis Stradom there. He talks about the 40 vintages that you get to make, and you've got those to try and get right over the course of a winemaking career. Well, so far, so good for all three of our winemakers on the show, but particularly Erika, who's flying along in her post-Graham Beck space with a number of wines. And the one I've got here in particular, Erika, is a grape that I think we all want to talk about tonight. This is your Flabbergast from 2019. We had JD from Wildeburg on the show last week, and he spoke ever so slightly controversially about how he feels that Cinsault should be South Africa's calling card as a red grape. I can already hear the grumpy Pinotage champions and the arguing Cabernet Sauvignon, and there's so many different claims, but we are in a really, really fun, interesting, exciting space for Cinsault, as all three of you on the show this evening illustrate. Tell me a bit about not just your Flabbergast, but about where you feel Cinsault sits on that array of offerings that we have as a South African wine country.
I love Cinsault. I started to work with it while I was still with Graham Beck in 2015. And we particularly then looked at a varietal that can bring so much more energy and youth and flavors and upfront fruit to a blend. And I started to work with Cinsaults from all over the Achterpaal, Vergrove, some of the cool climate Cinsaults. And I just love the variety. When I visit the farm in Achterpaal, there's this, my Flabbergas is from a 1982 planting, old bush vines that really just delivers every single year. It doesn't matter whether it's cold, heat waves, they tend to just get better. I started to work with the 1954 planting, also in the Achterpaal, just amazing vineyards. But, the farmers don't talk about Cinsault as vineyards, they call them wheat. And I think that's one of our strong points for South Africa is that similar to the Shannon and the Cinderella story around the grape, that a lot of farmers didn't really attend any attention. The vineyards stayed because no one wanted to take them out. They were just left alone. And with the resurgence of Cinsault, now we have this amazing quality of very old bush vines still left. And it's a grape that is really rewarding. It loves the South African terroir. It loves sunshine. It doesn't really drop the acids when it gets very ripe. Kind of almost like go with a vintage and adapt accordingly, where sometimes the more noble varietals will often show you a very big dropout in acids when there's lots of heat waves. So it's certainly a grape that's been around for almost forever. It's really suited to our terroir, and it just makes wines of not always weight, but easy drinking wines that still has enough tannin to go with any kind of meat. So I think in the year and time we're living, people want to enjoy wine. They don't always want to drink wines that needs to be cellared for ages. So it certainly plays in my portfolio. I try and focus on various wines that there always should be one wine which people can enjoy. So if you don't really like wines with a lot of tannin structure, you want to drink white or red wines throughout the year, Cinsault is really the varietal to go with. And it's just got that, I always say what makes it so beautiful is the freshness. It's got that berry fruit, the wild cherries, and then it brings that lovely savoriness, the umami flavors, and it's got this incredible fresh acid that just works well in blends on its own. It's just an incredible variety to work with, and I'm very excited for the quality that's coming from South Africa.
You're not the only one enjoying it. Andy Walger watching over in America, who imports a number of South African wines, including Erika's. Hey, Dan, another epic show in progress with 3 very talented winemakers. Of course, I owe you a glass or 6 for introducing me to Erika. Whenever I hear her talk about her wine, it inspires me to push harder and sell more of the Erika O range. I showcased Erika's Flabbergas, that is the Cinsault in Charlotte, North Carolina last Saturday, and we sold out in an hour. Well done, Andy, and well done, Erika, with a grape that Erika certainly likes. You could hear from what she said. It's one she believes in greatly and does a lot with. But I think even Erika would concede that she probably isn't quite so medically obsessed with Cinsault as Alex is, because if I look at Alex's range, there's not just one Cinsault, there's 2+ Cinsault popping up in a rather unusual but very alluring rosé. Where does this obsession with Cinsault come from, Alex?
I think the 2020 vintage, before we got locked down, I wanted to make some Cinsault because I wanted to make a wine that was lighter and spicier and driven by loads of fruit, and purely in terms of my production, because we were small and we still are small, and I bottle my whites and my reds all in one shot to not have to have a bottling line come out 100 times in the year. And Cinsault was a something I wanted to play around with, and I always enjoyed drinking Cinsault. And yeah, it just drove me to make something light and bright and fruity. And since then, we've been looking for different vineyards, just exploring the different kinds of wines that come from the different areas where we've got big plantings of Cinsault. And Erika says it so well. It loves wherever it's planted. It grows like an absolute weed, and it's so expressive in terms of cool climate, warm climate. You end up getting a really great wine. And I didn't want to make a rosé, but the husband won on this one, and he said, "Look, I think we need a rosé in our range." And I made a rosé last year, and I'm really glad I did, because I think we all need to be drinking better rosé. I don't love rosé, but I think if we can have something that's got spice and beautiful fruit that isn't a white wine, it gives us an option to have with sushi that isn't Shannon in our range. So yeah, I think if I would do 100% more things if I could with Cinsault. So hopefully we can do some blends going forward and just play around and see what it does in blends and as standalone varieties.
Of course, the blend is a big part of Cinsault's history in South Africa. You go back to the 70s and early 80s, and it was Cinsault alongside Cabernet Sauvignon. The great Chateau Libertas of the 70s in particular were exactly that. And so we're now seeing a grape in Cinsault that's getting its own time in the spotlight, not sitting under the shadow of somebody else. And you're doing a great job of cementing that. Before we look at the rosé, and I want to ask you about the names of these in a moment, but before we do that, we've got the Tuesdays Club for Cinsault. Tuesday's Child is full of grace, I think. Tuesday's Child, and then there's the Capitoline Wolf. Before I ask you about the names in particular, both of these are Cinsaults. Why two different ones? What are you trying to say with these two different wines?
So the Monday's Child and Tuesday's Child are part of our, we call it the Wines of the Week range, and they're sort of a little bit more upper level, a little bit more serious, and the Capitoline Wolf wines are a little bit more approachable. So the Tuesday's Child was made to be a little bit more serious, a bit more tannin. They're both low alcohol, lighter, fresher wines, but the Tuesday's Child is sort of the bigger brother, and the Capitoline is meant to be something you can chuck in your fridge, drink around the braai, but is still serious enough for you to take it a little bit more seriously than, something frivolous. It's still meant to be something that has presence, but shows good typicity and just is driven by loads of red fruit. I ended up blending a little bit of something else into the Tuesday's Child, just to make it a little bit more serious. But that's how we've kind of differentiated the two ranges.
It's a cool way of doing it. Monday's Child is fair of face. Tuesday's Child is full of grace. Wednesday's Child is full of woe. Thursday's Child is far to go. Friday's Child is loving and giving. Saturday's Child works hard for a living. And Sunday's Child just does nothing and puts their feet up. I think that's kind of how
something like that.
So a fun way of having wines of the week and a weekly wine for each day. What about the Capitoline Wolf? What is a Capitoline Wolf?
So it's a bit of a long story, but I like having stories behind a wine and why we've decided to call or given something a name. And the Capitoline Wolf in 2020, I think it was mid-March when we had our lockdowns. We just launched the 2019 vintage of our first wine, which was Monday's Child. And we had our big lockdowns, and we tripled our production because we had a certain amount of space that we were paying for, and we were going to be paying it anyway. So we made 6 tons worth of wine. And so the Capitoline was in that bunch. And we looked at not being able to sell wine, and we went, through the year of those really awful lockdowns, and we kind of got to bottling time. We bottled, and we looked at what we were going to do. Were we going to cast the wine into the bulk wine river, or were we going to save it and make something that, because nobody knows us, is at a lower price point that would be less of a risk for someone who's spending their very precious disposable income on a new brand? And the story goes for the Capitoline Wolf, Remus and Romulus as babies. They were twins. They were cast into the Tiber River, and they were saved by the Capitoline Wolf, and she kept them alive until a farmer came across them and saved them. And then eventually Remus and Romulus went on to found Rome. So we wanted to save our babies and not throw them into the bulk wine river, which was the other option that we had because of COVID. So that's where that name came from.
Well, I'm very glad that the Wolf was able to inspire that particular call. Just quickly before I jump back to Lorraine, I must ask you about the rosé and a fascinating wine, particularly in your choice of not just Cinsault, but Semillon as well. It's a curious combination. It's not one I think I've come across before. It's one I've thoroughly enjoyed from the little I've tasted so far. Was that just, oh, look, I've got some of this sitting in a cupboard, I'll toss it in, or was there a little more to the thinking than that?
There was quite a lot of thinking. Blending time for me is a big time. And I think because I'm an independent winemaker and I buy grapes from so many different vineyards, I'm not terribly set on having specific origins on my back labels. The only wine that I'm very serious about having a specific origin is the Monday's Child as a Stellenbosch Chenin Blanc, because that was our first wine. So if you turn the wine around, most of our wines are Western Cape. And the fruit for that rosé came from the Breda Kloof. And every year it gives me a lot of Turkish delight and spice, and I wanted to capture that for a rosé. But it's quite an old vineyard, so it comes in with low sugar. and it gets made like a white wine where I stir it on the lees. But I wasn't happy with the palate weight. It didn't have enough breadth. And I did have some Semillon, and I did a little blend together, and I looked at the two, and the Semillon kind of carries it and gives it a different kind of level and makes it a little bit more serious. And you do take notice of it a little bit more because of that Semillon. And I have to declare it on the label because there's 20% Semillon in there. And I'm not a winemaker that does it in the background and then pretends like it's just Cinsault. So I'm happy to tell people that there's Semillon in there because I think it does a lot for the wine to carry the mid palate.
I think it certainly does. And I also think you talked earlier about your husband wanting the rosé, but I think there are a lot of people in South Africa who are really embracing rosé that is made far more seriously and made without the kind of the afterthought feel that a lot of rosé was made once upon a time. So there's one to look out for. It's driven by the Cinsault. Lorraine, it's a passion of yours as well. And Cinsault, we've seen with Erika, we've seen with Alex, it is a grape on the up. Where does the Cinsault love come from for you? And why do you think we're in such a good space with Cinsault at the moment?
Well, mine started, I received a book when I graduated. An old family friend gave me a book that said Wine Estates of South Africa. And I think in the beginning, or on the front page, it's actually in pencil, it's something like 427, so it's an old book, and I never really got into this book until I started with Stellenzicht, and I really wanted to know everything about the property and the area, and I really kind of just went boots and all down a rabbit hole, and opened this book again, and there I learned how in the 1920s a lot of the red varieties were interplanted, and so a lot of the red blends, because they would actually just kind of pick the block in one go, would have a huge Cinsault component, and I'd worked with Cinsault before, and I always found it, as both Eric and Alex have mentioned, such a great fresh variety. It's got such a vibrancy to it. It's a really lively wine always, and what it does, but in a blend. And that's kind of mostly how I knew Cinsault. But it really kind of tickled my fancy, and I needed to just kind of do it. So Cinsault features heavily in the Stellenzicht portfolio. We've got it in our 2 red blends. It's a single varietal, and then it's makes a good chunk of our rosé as well. And I just really love how it's able to kind of be a lot of things and yet just be true to itself. So it's like, the perfect best friend. It just makes friends with all these other varieties so well, but it's still such an awesome variety just by itself. And I really, our Cinsault for our Silkreed Cinsault, which is 100% Cinsault, also comes from old bush vines in the Platter, and it's just amazing. Like Erika also mentioned, how they just keep going. They're not bothered about wind and rain and heat and everything you can throw at it. It just keeps consistently producing these amazing fruity bunches that you just kind of, I get giddily excited when it arrives at the cellar, and I just need to, because of obviously the size of the berry and the thin skin, I always just need to kind of keep everybody away, because we're supposed to eat it because it tastes so delicious. And I was like, no, this is not for eating. This is my precious babies. Leave them alone. But yeah, so for me, it's really interesting. And now having our own Cinsault on the property and seeing how the Stellenbosch Cinsault is different and acting, just reacting different and expressing itself differently on the Helderberg terroir versus the Paardeberg, old bush vines, is really interesting. But it's definitely a love affair that's growing.
You mentioned the fact that you've got it growing there now. It's a wine I referenced earlier, having been part of a blend for so long with Chateau Libertas famously, but with a lot of other South African reds. You are in Cabernet Sauvignon heartland in Stellenbosch, and in just a second, we'll see how yours shapes up alongside that of Erika. Where is Cinsault's place? You are somewhere that people flock to drinking-wise for Cabernet Sauvignon. Cinsault featured in the Minority Report last week for Wine Mag, which suggests it's still a very small player. Will that grow, or is it destined to always be something of a niche in South Africa?
No, I definitely think it's growing. I mean, you're talking about Cabernet, and yes, Stellenzicht is in the Helderberg, which is known for its amazing Cabernets. But I definitely think Cinsault as a place, I think there's a and you don't make wine because of trends, but I definitely think there is a trend where people are, drinking lighter styles. They want something they can enjoy through the whole year. And Cinsault's are perfect for that because, as the other two mentioned, it's the perfect wine that you can chill slightly. You can drink it straight through the year. It's got that lovely vibrancy, freshness, fruitiness. And I think it's more a thing of, the other ladies mentioned Chenin, and I kind of think Chenin's 10 years maybe ahead of where Cinsault is right now. 10 years ago, people were, asking all these questions about Chenin and, why is it happening? And now I think there's a bunch of us that's really driving Cinsault, and the more people are exposed to it, the more understand the variety, especially by itself. I think the more open they become to this variety and the more interested they become. We find a lot that people don't know what it is, and then they taste it and then they love it. So it's usually how that progresses. And then I almost want to say that they don't even care about the price of the wine. They're just like, I like this, I want this, where do I get this? So I definitely think that love affair is growing. But yeah, it's just going to take some time. I definitely think it's got its place as a premium South African variety.
Well, it's only heading in that direction. The competition comes in the form of other stuff that is being made on the same property. Cabernet Sauvignon is still very much the headline act in the Helderberg, and you're making Cabernet Sauvignon from grapes not too far down the road from Erika's. There are some fundamental differences. Tell us a little bit about your Cabernet Sauvignon and why this Helderberg space for you just continues to deliver such staggeringly good interpretations of the grape.
Yeah, we do have quite a bit of a magical spot here on the mountain. We've got these north-facing slopes, and even within the Helderberg or Greater Helderberg area. So, as you're going to chat with Erika now, is you've got pockets within the Helderberg, but I just generally think this greater area of Helderberg is fantastic for Cabernet. And it's a combination between the slopes that we have, these north-facing slopes. There's a lot of sunshine that we get straight through the day. We aren't too far from the ocean, so we do get a bit of a cooling effect. And then just the soils. We've got a lot of really well-drained soils, and Cabernet just tends to really love it here. We've got some blocks here. So our Cabernet is called the Tri-Stone, which refers to the 3 types of kind of rocky soils we get on the property. So we don't necessarily have our Cabernet all planted on high potential soils. And even so, it's just loving this area. So I think it's just this perfect combination of climate, soils, microclimates, and pockets within this area that just creates this perfect growing space for Cabernet and delivers amazing quality, yet all very different. So if you go and taste Cabernets from all over the Helderberg, you're going to be surprised how they all still show their individual character and personality.
Endorsement from Dawn Christie, who's watching at the moment. Love it, says Dawn. I'm not sure if that's the Cinsault or the Cabernet Sauvignon or the show or just the ruggedly athletic and good-looking nature of the host. Either way, Dawn, thank you very much indeed. Glad you are watching. Give me your riposte to that, Erika. The Helderberg Cabernet Sauvignon, Lorraine believes it can accentuate its own little pockets of terroir from across the Helderberg region. There is a kind of a broad feel to Helderberg Cabernet Sauvignon, but are there these little intricate details of Cabernet Sauvignon that speak to where it's come from across the area?
Yeah, in particularly, I love the Helderberg. I think Stellenbosch Cabernet in its whole is just phenomenal. I'll never forget in 2000, and I think it was 2000. I've been in the wine industry for a very long time. Andy from the University of Stellenbosch were doing phenolic ripeness analysis, and he phoned me. It was the first year he studied. He did his PhD on Bordeaux varieties and looking at those analyses in Bordeaux, and he phoned me and he said, "Where is these grapes from?" Because he's never seen something like that, and they all the analysis were on par with what the best of the Bordeaux vintages delivered. So I think Stellenbosch in its whole is just world class for this varietal. But particularly, I love the Helderberg. I think the Helderberg delivers wines of weight, but in itself, it's wines with a lot of elegance and that freshness that I always like on red wines. I think freshness brings forward a wine with a lot of tannin in such a different way. So the Helderberg is my favorite wort for Cabernet. Particularly, I work with the foot of the Helderberg, which is much closer to the ocean. The soils are slightly more weathered, so we get much more drainage of the soil, so it will ripen much earlier. On average, about 2 to 3 weeks prior to the vineyards high up on the Helderberg. So that in itself, to me, is a huge plus point in the sense that beginning of March, we still have quite a lot of warm afternoons and particularly hot sunshine mornings, which I find concentrate the fruit on the Cabernet so well. My vineyard sits about 2 to 3 kilometers from the False Bay Rim, so it literally has a view on that beautiful bay from Hung Clip all the way to Cape Point. And in a morning where the winds are coming into these vineyards, it cools it down. And we never get temperatures higher than 23, 24 degrees Celsius. On average, fir growth area on the foot of the Helderberg is about 5 degrees Celsius cooler than Midtown Stellenbosch. So it's really cool climate Cabernet, but the soils are really what it's all about. These decomposed granitic soils just deliver the most amazing tannin structure. The roots are able to penetrate up to 4 meters down. We often find the vineyards 3 rows down, we'll find the root system going, and they literally are able to get to that moisture right towards the end of ripening. So it's slow ripening because of the close proximity to the ocean, a lot of wind, that the air cons that we need to cool down these vineyards. So we're able to ripen the tannins 100% and then all together concentrate that fruit. So I'm just in love with Helderberg in particular, but the foot of the Helderberg is pretty amazing.
And that's what leads to all these little idiosyncrasies. I'm not sure there's a grape that has got more contrast in its ripening time than Cabernet Sauvignon South Africa, depending on where it is planted and what its conditions are like. If it is this one, then you are on to a winner. And this 2018 Erika Obermeyer Cabernet Sauvignon, which I'm not sure is going to see out the rest of this evening, particularly if my wife is involved, is one of the wines that will be drunk on Wednesday night. Because, Erika, you are taking your life in your hands, shooting up to Johannesburg, and we're going to be co-hosting an evening of wine at the Old Oak on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I haven't been to Joburg enough, especially after COVID. You know, when you're also doing everything yourself, I've got a few people helping me now. The space needs a few more hands and heads to keep it going. But I'm looking forward to be back in the market to share the wines. You know, it's wonderful to do everything in the cellar. But the most incredible thing is to take that wine out and to share it, get it into the glasses of customers that can equally enjoy it as much. So I'm looking forward. We're also introducing our Chenin Blanc, which is new to the portfolio. The very first tasting, we just labeled the wine. It's the 21 vintage. A very, very good vintage for especially white wines. So I'm very excited, and I'm going to pack my bags tonight, and I'm on that plane tomorrow. So I'll see you soon in Joburg.
Very, very excited. I think it is a full house, but you never know. Drop a note to the Old Oak at Royal Johannesburg. They might be able to squeeze you in on Wednesday night. 6 courses with wine to match and the sparkling company of Erika Obermeyer. If you missed that and you're feeling depressed, you just can't possibly get away on Wednesday, but you still love to taste some great wine, or maybe next Tuesday, because I will then be seeing Lorraine up in Johannesburg at Norman Goodfellows and the Four Ways store. You're also headed up north, Lorraine. What can we look forward to with you next week? I think we might have lost Lorraine there, but we do have the wine in question. So there we go. That's what will be drunk. That is next Tuesday evening. You'll see details up on our social media platforms. But if you'd like to come along, there we go. I think we've got Lorraine back. So we're talking about the wine.
Yeah, no, looking forward to it. We're showing our new Chardonnays, and then I may or may not be bringing along some of our vintages that will be relaunched in May and June this year. So if you want to have a sneak peek of what's to come in the next month or two from Stellenzicht, then come join us at the tasting. It's going to be an exclusive tasting of some of the up and coming vintages, which I'm really excited to share.
All right. Well, we look forward to welcoming you up to Johannesburg. I see Andrew Woolgar already has Erika's Shannon in North Carolina. Of course you do, Andrew. And then Mega MB 777, who's watching over on YouTube, says, can't wait to taste more Cab, Cinso, Shannon, and Syrah. Buy a donkey for all the wonderful wines. Now, buy a donkey you for watching Mega MB 777. Maybe if you're in Joburg, come and join us in 4 ways with that wine. Lorraine, going forward, there's obviously going to be a bit of a focus on Cinso. You've got lots of very cool varietals to juggle. Where's your focus as a winemaker over the next vintage or two? What's really exciting you about where you can take the Stellenzicht brand?
Yeah, so I'm really excited to just build on the consistency that we built over the first 2 vintages. As mentioned, we only launched in 2021, so it's early days for us. And then, as mentioned, we've got so many of our new young vineyards coming into production and really seeing what they can bring to the portfolio. We focus on Cabernet, Shiraz, and Chardonnay. That's the 4 varieties we focus on, and we showcase them in a multitude of ways, but you might have heard it here first, and it's only going to be launched end of next year, but there might be a bubbles incoming at some stage that I've been playing with. I do have a love affair of Chardonnay, probably comes from my studies in Burgundy, but that's my second love after Cinso. So yeah, excited to see what we can do with that. And then just really exploring all these new vineyards. It's very exciting for a winemaker to be able to get my hands on so many different blocks and just kind of grow with these blocks. It's like seeing your babies grow up, and I'm really excited to see what they do in the next few years.
You did hear it here first. Bubbles on the way, end of 2024. Chardonnay, Blanc to Blanc, bit of a blend. Well, I think we might have to wait a little longer to find out, but it does sound particularly exciting. Before we wrap up, let's jump back to Alex. Is there a sense now, after the long slog, the saving up, the putting in the work, the giving up of the job to focus full-time on the wine, that you've now got your feet firmly into the new space, and that this is now where you want to be and what you're going to make a real success of?
Absolutely. And we've got plans. We've been playing around with some other varieties. As I said, we're looking at some Pinotage. We've made it for 2 years in a row. The one that we would have released soon will hopefully go overseas, and it won't even hit the local market. But also just exploring and sharing the more unknown varieties like Crucian Blanc, and some of the ones that kind of have always been part of a blend and have been a big backbone to a blend, but haven't often been showcased as premium single varieties. So I'm really excited. I think when I look at making wine, it's teaching me patience. I'm not the most patient person, but you have to wait a long time before you get to put the wines into the glass that you've been getting to know over a period in barrel. So I'm really excited to focus full time on it and spend many months sharing our wines with people and getting everyone really excited about the things that I love as well.
All right. Well, there are several already. It looks like there are many more to come. We've had a few of them here. I must ask, just before we wrap up, is there a Wednesday's child, a Thursday's child, a Friday's child?
There is actually a Thursday's child. There's a Thursday's child behind me. I did make one. Let me quickly grab it. I made a Thursday's child. Thursday's child has far to go. I made this as a once-off. This was from a really special vineyard in Paarl, but I won't get those grapes again. So there is another new release in the pipeline for 2023. Wednesday's child is full of woe, and nothing has made me too woeful yet. So That's not going to happen anytime soon, I hope. But we do have a Saturday's Child Pinotage coming out. And we might be doing something with Grenache and a couple of other things coming up. So we'll see where they land up, but we'll eventually fill more days of the week, definitely.
All right, so look out for a 6-day week. If it becomes 7 and Wednesday's Child is made, there are warning signs. Guys, thank you. It has been an utter delight having all three of you on the show and sharing your collective love of wine and wisdom therein. I see Grant Sauls is watching over on YouTube. Sad to be missing the Royal Oak tasting next time for sure. That's only because Grant's got his feet up at Delagrasse for the week. Guzzling down more vintage wine. I think you'll survive, Grant. Guys, thank you all. Good luck with the continuing wine adventures, Cinso and otherwise. Lorraine, we will see you next week at Norman Goodfellows on Tuesday evening. Erika, we'll see you tomorrow up in Johannesburg. Great excitement amongst the Nichols. And Alex, hopefully we'll see you up in this part of the world soon as well, and continue to chronicle this wonderful wine journey that you're on.
Definitely.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you. We'll have a lovely, lovely evening. And thank you very much for some wonderful wine. My company this evening from Stellenzicht, Lorraine Hughes, who will be with us at Norman Goodfellows next Tuesday evening. Head to the Norman Goodfellows website if you would like to join us and be part of that tasting with Stellenzicht. Some terrific wine and some great offers at Norman Goodfellows at the moment. Also, in fact, there they are. They've got the Silkreed Cinso, your chance to try that. The Tri-Stone that was mentioned as well, the Cabernet Sauvignon taken from the 3 different types of rocks that they have on the estate. And the Aronite, the Syrah, completing a very, very well-priced trio of wine as we head towards winter and the need for some warming reds. And then look out for Erika. Last chance, you might just squeeze in tickets for the Old Oak on Wednesday night. And Alex, probably just more and more since. She does love it, doesn't she? She makes it particularly well. That wraps us up for this evening on Dan Really Likes Wine. Come Thursday, we're going to be talking to a few wine writers and people who are showcasing their love of wine through the written word. Amongst them on Thursday, we'll be having Chardonnay and suitcases and Chardonnay. What's that about? We'll have to find out on Thursday. And we will also, Laura Seeley from Laura's World will be amongst our guests, people chronicling a love of wine, how they got into it, what's really exciting them about the wine world at the moment, amongst other talk and discussion on the subject of wine. That wraps us up for this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Dan Really Likes Wine with Norman Goodfellows. And do not forget that if you're buying wine this month and you're at Norman Goodfellows online or in store or on the Dan Really Likes Wine store, you've got that Bosch & Dahl competition that's running at the moment, and your chance to win yourself a trip down to Bosch & Dahl for 2 people, 2 nights. It includes the accommodation, includes meals at De Werf and at also at the deli, picnic, horse riding, wine tasting. It's a wonderful trip, and it's all yours if you're the lucky winner simply by buying a bottle of the Nicholas or any bottle of Bubbles from Norman Goodfellows from the Bosch & Dahl stable. That does it for this evening. Good luck with your wine shopping. Good luck with your wine drinking. And as you've seen from this evening, keep watching Cinso. It is only on the up. Goodbye. This is Bosch & Dahl Wine Estate, and this is going to be your home if you win one of the coolest prizes in wine this year. For the month of April, Dan Really Likes Wine and Norman Goodfellows have teamed up with Bosch & Dahl for the wine experience of a lifetime. Simply buy any bottle of the Nicholas Red Blend or Bubbles from Bosch & Dahl, and you'll go into the draw to win this as a prize. 2 nights accommodation plus flights down to the Cape, transfers to the estate, lunch or dinner at both the deli and the Werf restaurant, a picnic in the splendid Bosch & Dahl grounds, and if you're feeling adventurous, the chance to go horse riding, and on top of that, a wine tasting for some of the great vintages of South African wine. To enter any bottle of Nicholas or any bottle of Bubbles, buy them at Norman Goodfellows stores, online, or the Dan Really Likes Wine pop-up store, and that fabulous Bosch & Dahl prize could be all yours.